Another year in the books, and another Skyrim follower tournament completed. Though this run ended up taking a couple months after the conclusion of the poll to come out. This run was supposed to come out in October, but other runs had to come out first due to their time-sensitive nature. So J'zargo, the funny, smug Khajiit that everyone seems to love. I knew the cat was loved, but not this much. I guess Skyrim has an active furry community. Well, actually given Ayala came in second, and my profile pic, I think it all makes sense. Just like Serana, the winner of the follower tournament will get a run dedicated to them, so join me today as I attempt to be a menace to society at J'zargo. Rules are going to be way too simple. J'zargo is an aspiring mage, so really, the only rules I have is that I must be Khajiit and using spells. Well, the only rule I have is that I'm banning the Creation Club spells except for the Unbound spells, which will only be used for leveling. They are all disgustingly overpowered. Well, I say that, but my mage build will get super OP very quickly, but oh well. The run is more or less based around the bonus objectives, which are based around the college. I must complete the college questline and help out with all the non-raiding quests that aren't master locked except for one. With all that out of the way, how sure will J'zargo get before J'zargo gets in way over his head from J'zargo's arrogance? Let's find out. Starting with the character creator, I do make my best effort in making everyone's favorite smug cat. Well, I say attempt, but given one of my trademarks besides being a complete psychopath with a fetish with sea captain hats is being horrid at the character creator. I kinda failed the run before starting it, partially because the image I was using to base my character off of didn't have J'zargo's mustache well pronounced. Well, that and facial hair isn't something I think about with Khajiits, given their entire body's facial hair. I wrap up the character creator with a simple name, and nearly lose my head for breaking every expensive vase in the house. I thought I saw a mouse in there. The intro is the same old for runs: vault over a dragon's head, run past their wings, and avoid the fires inside with the Imperials in the keep. Since I'm not bound by weapon restrictions, I am free to roast any stormcloaks I come across. They thought they were safe from the fires of a fire-breathing dragon. Nah, they get to bathe in a different form of fire. Not even 5 minutes in, and I'm already relishing in war crimes. Why is my morality a suggestion in these Skyrim runs? Inside the BDSM dungeon, I equipped the novice robe so I look like the egotistical kitten. I don't have an armor restriction this playthrough because a part of the narrative for this run, since most of my runs seem to have some underlying narrative these last few months, is that of progress, beginning at the nadir of the magic tree and rising up to become the best mage in Skyrim. It is the dream of J'zargo, so it reflects with my character. I roast my way through the Stormcloaks, burn down my house to get rid of the wolf spider infestation because I stepped on some eggs, and I am outside, ready to begin my pilgrimage of actualization. And of course, since this is the early game, I do my simple routine of roasting bandits for the simple act of living, then visiting the nearby shrine for some hooded Thalma robes. I will be specializing down the enchanting tree, since I will argue enchanting is the most important skill tree in the game, and I begin putting embers into the Ember Shard mines. Well, I say that, but it ended up being a coal seam fire, lighting up the entire mine and will continue to burn for thousands of years. At least the bodies won't need to be buried. The purifications of the mine was really simple, and the bandits didn't even know it hit them. Can't you see the flaming semi-truck coming down the highway coming right at you? Since I am high on an egomaniac trip, I figure I could plunder through Bleak Falls Barrow. Something I will preface. My brain was working in absolute overtime when recording this, self-tuned to optimization, and free from the fog that usually plagues me. As for speaking out the voice lines, I had a lot of trouble today. I was honestly surprised how fast I could do inventory sifts. Maybe this is the power of being a hyper-intellectual supreme being, or my medication is actually working. Don't worry, it isn't the antipsychotic meds. I forget to take them when I record. Inside the burrow, I roast the bandits, and actually embracing the logos of grad school. I let the bandit outlaw fall into the very obvious trap, the first rule of ruins. If the solution is obvious, take a look around the room to see if it is a trap. Or having played this game way too many f***ing times at this point. While I continue to be hyper in tune with the game, it had a very easy time with the winded frostbite spider. Who would have thunk the biggest weakness to a melee combatant that is very dummy thick is to stand in a doorway. Arvel becomes marvelously roasted, and the enemies transition to the more difficult to take out Draugr. Well, I say that, but the simple act of backing up slowly gets the needed results, along with casting my fire spells in rapid succession. The dungeon at this point goes into overdrive as I continue to rack up delicious experience, which will be very useful in my ascension up the ladder of academia. I want all the grant money to myself to fund my totally safe experiments. The second section goes down without much fuss, and for the Overlord, I think one of the wires in its brain must have gotten singed from the cheap parts installed, and it just stood there as I continue to apply heat to its forehead. Well, the Dragonstone is mine, and now I can get back on track with my usual early game routine. such as plundering my brethren's chest for any loot for enchanting, much to the comment section's dismay. With a traveling merchant's life work plundered for some crumbs of experience, I did some small time enchanting, becoming the domino effect that shall see to the rise of the sociopath to power. I will need a lot of enchanting experience for this run. Still in the midst of my intermittent preparation, I did take the time to upgrade my spell repertoire, along with exploiting some gold. Money is meaningless, and if you know your alchemy, you can always just conjure up money out of a machine to funnel into the high-end investments ad nauseum until the system is teetering on the brink of collapse and society also collapses in the meantime. Or you could fuse a kid and a dog together. That works too. Since the primary focus of J'zargo's journey is at the college, I figure I could probably get that questline started. I cast fear on the floor to let the admissions know I am a son of a politician, so you better let me party and not expel me. Your grant money is on the line. I do the basic class by sleeping through it and using whatever nonsense the chatbot tells me to say, not second guessing if it's true or not. I'm here to be mindless and parrot talking points, not critically thinking about every situation. I also had a nice conversation with the superior being of J'zargo and getting a prime look at the mustache of power. The rest of this first visit is full of preparations for the journey ahead, such as upgrading my robes and getting some homework to try out in a bit. You know, being a diligent student and trying to get ahead of the bell curve, and letting the stragglers get bailed out of college. Life isn't fair, and I shall do whatever it takes to come out ahead. I met the class outside of the ruin and began a fun-filled field trip. It isn't a fun trip to the zoo until you jump the gate into the gorilla enclosure and break in the space-time continuum, bringing us down the dark pathway of illegal flashing. I get a warning that continuing down this pathway will lead to destruction. Please, if you believe in nihilism, this was the inevitable outcome. Now comes the zombies, which goes down easily enough thanks to flash fire spamming, along with a well-timed fire level up. Knowing about the runes on the floor, I can hopefully avoid spontaneously combusting, and I can just combust from my ego. Saarthal is quite a step up in difficulty compared to silly old Bleak Falls, as much more of the Draugr are restless from all the nighttime examinations, and I have to stress the orb on my brain on these taxing puzzles. Near the midpoint of the second section is a Draugr White, which could probably one-shot me at this point. I was not scared, because if there's one thing these undead hates, it's slowly backing up. It went down easily enough, and I'm back to solving puzzles and stressing out about not messing up, and I nearly had to cheat on the exam. Eventually the proctor joins up with me, and came the boss fight with Gyrek, which mostly revolves around stalling just long enough for the barrier to go down, and I can roast the evildoer's balls to a husk. And I can begin the questline. I decided to actually do the Galder questline just because. Something Tolfdir has big balls, and I let the arch-mage know that tuition rates are going to go up yet again for the 8th year in a row. I love being priced out of career prospects without going massively in debt. The next quest involves grabbing some overdue library books and being asked by the dean of students why I'm up at 3 AM partying. Since I have cleared the intro quest, I can now start helping out the other students with their problems. Onmin wants me to talk to the drug dealer on getting his staff back, which is pretty far away, and I also help Raylina with her homework, which turns the world to Fallout 3. I spaced out the best character for a while, but I could always go for a nature hike, so I departed from the Standing Stones to venture to the southwest. A peaceful hike, but that was until I had some morts try to vor me in the middle of the night. Sorry, but cat fur doesn't taste very good, thank you very much. The tower where the radiant system led me to was out in the open, while the necromancer was a little to take down. Who would have thought that a mage can counter a mage? Oh well, I wrote some fine leg for the zombies to munch on, and I figure I could do some more wandering, as my attention span at this point goes all over the place. I decided to help out with some homework by testing out a fire scroll at a place of impending doom, so I visited the Hall of Vigilantes to give it a test. Okay, good to know. It has an advanced resonation, causing the entire area to immolate. Glad to put this hypothesis to the test. I could have tested out somewhere away from civilians, but I got to continue my anti-vigilante spree. Now comes the next piece of my build, wanting to get started on power leveling my build. If I play my destruction naturally, I might be level 67 by the end of the journey. And I want to do the Master Destruction questline, so I guess I could do the funny exploit. I venture my way northwest of Saarthal towards the funny Hobbs Fall Cave, full of more skeletons and necrophiliacs wanting to get boned. Not my kink, but whatever keeps them toasty. Anyways, the reason I'm here is for the Chest of Creation Club goodies. Well yes, I did say no Creation Club. I did make an exception for the Unbound spells. Fast travel while casting the Unbound spells will level your destruction like crazy. One long distance journey leveled me up to level 75, and I get the very funny impact perk, which is one of the most disgustingly overpowered skills in the game. Thinking I got the prerequisite required for the Master Destruction, I checked it with my professor for my report. Vigilantes are now extra toasty, and getting more spells to spam, along with some better robes. Sadly, she doesn't have the Master Destruction quest available for me, so I'll probably need 100 Destruction before I can do that. I wanted to be a lazy student and not give it my 100%, but I guess I will have to. But at least this has been one giant head start in my journey to self-realization, to become a Master Wizard. I just took one giant leapfrog step. When I returned to the college, a silly mercenary tried to teach me a lesson. Try teaching me a lesson while encased in ice, dumbass. I returned to the dorms, handed in the item to my skooma dealer, then becoming every furry's dream of transformation as everyone judges in the distance. I became a cow, a dog, a call to action subscribe button, and after cycling my personas, I wrap up the quest and start J'zargo's quest, which requires me using totally safe scrolls. They just have the fine print super small, just gotta sell your personal information and forgo all basic rights, so any modern TOS document. Needing to get the main story on track, I ventured into Whiterun where I had a mage duel in the streets, except of course I don't have much magicka to my name, and the fight was pretty drawn out. Nobody wants to help with the duel, and I was probably using too expensive of spells, or have name, who's to say. I come out of the duel on top after causing thousands of dollars in property damage, and I do the casual meetings before the first dragon fight, whilst also upgrading my kit a bit to reduce my magicka cost. Probably could have helped before the mage fight. The first dragon fight was pretty easy. Well, sure, it's a giant frosty dragon because it is December and the holiday music is all festive even though it is technically fall. It's not of any concern. So Impact is one of the most broken skills in the game for one reason. I just unlocked Mimulnir. If it thought it could make my willy chilly, I zapped it to submission. No horny thoughts in here, only torture. There really wasn't much to be said. I turned the dragon into a dust bunny, and I am getting my next task to go work on my calves to climb some stairs. And of course that means going back to the kittens and eating their food right out of the cans. That will teach them discipline. Also, horse meat is a 0 out of 10 experience. At least now with all my Fortified Destruction enchantments, I can cast spells for pennies on the dollar, and I can get my enchanting all the way to 50 to get yet another upgrade on my gear. Honestly, I'm so mentally all over the place, using the mountain outside of Solitude as my get out of free card if I ever need an instant level up. And in the midst of my wanderings like a geriatric who escaped the ward, or me whenever I get heavy brain fog, I am interrupted by Dirac wanting me to be recruited to his military force. I signed up for the draft as collateral when applying for unsustainable loans, so my ass is owned, and I teach him what's up. I inform the guards that this is a legally sanctioned murder in the state of my mind, and I am let go. Since I have all the destruction experience I need, I can start to transition to the Lordstone. On my way to the stone for those who like to assert dominance of their religion, revolving around a book they refuse to actually read, I was interrupted by spam callers, letting me know the warranty on my car is expired. Sorry, but those gift cards are reserved for ransomware hackers, thank you very much. Since I can indefinitely stagger nearly anything in the game, it kinda becomes a cakewalk. Well, I say that, but Frost is the awkward middle child that flunked out of school and lives in a van snorting coke out of a coke bottle and is avoided at family gatherings. Before long, I can use Divine Lightning from the Lord to the puny peasants and claim the stone for myself, and double checking the difficulty because this has been one of those runs where I feel unstoppable. Having my crappy ass memory back in working order, I return to the college to get started on the Master Destruction spell quest, and beginning my adventures to Iverstead, since I have 4 quests to do in the general region. I guess a remnant from my old 100% speedrunning days. Stockpile a bunch of quests to be taken out in one location. Or I'm just lucky, who knows. During the journey to Iverstead Fast, I was harassed by a forum troll who was stunned repeatedly by facts they refused to adhere to, rather wishing to pair talking points by fellow neckbeards towards the target of the week. Instead of an aerobics class in war crimes, I decided to swim to the nearby Gearman's Hall. This is a giant lecture hall for professors who really don't want to teach students, leaving it to the teacher's assistants to do all the heavy work. They're just there to collect the tenure money and peddle the overpriced outsourced subscription-based textbooks. Totally still not bitter about my physics classes. I remember this dungeon vividly once I saw the bridge that stumped me for so long when I was younger. Also annoying Draugr Wights and came across a Scourge, which wasn't that bad thanks to stun locking. Turns out the solution to the bridge conundrum is flicking switches behind you. Here I was using Whirlwind Sprint to cheese it. At the end of the dungeon is Sidious Nuts. A very easy boss when you're a mage. Just fight the Draugr with a depleted health bar and you are golden. Only after the fight, I remembered in my rapidly deteriorating mental faculties, the entire reason I went through the dungeon besides Galdur's Gate is to use the scrolls to get J'zargo. Okay, take 2. I just ran into the copies like a fanatic with an explicit jacket wanting to give a bear hug to the nearest person. Sure, it really blows up the Draugr things to effective damage, but I get really hurt in the meantime. I had to heal up after I got the 3 required hugs, and I was way worse at spotting the fake third time around, but at least I could have seconds on the bone meal. And for my efforts, I get an oversized golf ball from the nearby golf course the rich people in town go to. Next up is climbing the 10,000 steps, and I show a bear who's boss. They have a short stun animation, so I have to be a little quicker with the blast. And yeah, my bloodthirsty id of killing random people kinda gets the better of me. Again. I just get into a rhythm of playing these games, so we can have some fresh corpses for the biology classes. Show what electrotherapy does to the internal organs. Nothing stood in my way on the way up, even the frost roll was a joke. Stunlocking is very funny. Since I was in the neighborhood, I made a pit stop to the nearby ruins for the Master Destruction quest, only to remember I need to do the locations in order. I swear my brain only works a quarter of the time, and the remainder of the time is just thinking what would happen if a knife engages in coitus with the plugin. Oh well, I show the retirees what is up by outperforming in their class, since this is the 27th time I've taken their class, and I'm getting close to 50 total runs. Not my fault their exams always fall during the nighttime when I'm partying. Back at the dorms, I let Jazargo know I finished the homework for him, and now he can follow me for my journey. Yes, like last year, I will allow the follower I'm based around tag along. Twice the fun, twice the purrs, and twice the probability the furry convention will have a bunch of police show up because someone thought it'd be funny to pee on the fire hydrant. Or I'm back to being psychopathic, who knows. Just don't check the broom closet. Since I have kinda neglected the college for a while, I should probably get those library books so I don't get charged a $20 late fee. Someone tries to peddle me their stolen loot, so the cops don't arrest him. I give the officer the funny package, point to the fugitive, but since I want the study aid for myself, I just steal it back for myself. Stunning mages is pretty annoying, mostly with my spells just not doing anything while they're in the stun animation. The insides of the fort definitely had a funny smell to it, like when a manager and an accountant sneak out of the janitor's closet. I'll leave it to your imagination what they were doing in there. The rest of the ruins wasn't too difficult, just giving mages a wide variety of different enemy variants to learn. At least nobody here is an absolute sadist that forces exclusivity on alteration. I'm really not looking forward to that day when I have to do that spell family to round out the entire set. The caller really wasn't a fan of me barging in on her experiments. If you're working on biochemicals, please have a do not disturb sign on the front of the door. In the explosions, one of the books flew into an unknown corner of the room, so I had to use the Khajiit's otherwise useless Night Eye spell to see through the night. Probably the only time it's ever useful. Back at the university, I handed in the books I had to rent because like am I going to be buying $300 books to use for only 2 weeks, and they moved the big bulk to the obvious boss room. Well, there goes the tuition fees because having dangerous artifacts boosts a campus's ratings. Next up is talking to a gas giant on how to be halfway through the questline already because half of the college questline was cut. I wouldn't mind this quest if the Augur didn't speak so slowly it put the entire lecture hall to sleep while I threw an eraser at the chalkboard to wake everyone up. When I tried to skip travel back to the college, I was prevented because some dragon wanted to hang out nearby. That'll be a problem for future me, like all the homework I neglected. Since I was in the area, I talked to the local homeless man on philosophy. The only thing I got was mad ramblings and an empty whiskey bottle. So the meaning of life is that there is no hope and we should enjoy the day-to-day indulgences for one day it will be all gone, and the concept of our soul will vanish from this world, erased from the vestiges of history. Got it. When I returned to the college, the dragon for future me came for a visit. Well, I would be in trouble if it weren't so stunlockable. Well, I relayed the information, and now I can go back to procrastinating the questline, since I really don't want to do the worst dungeon of the game. So instead of falling asleep at the wheel driving into oncoming traffic, I decided to get useless gravy out of the way. Much like my Thanksgiving, it was boring, lonely, the turkey was burnt, the potatoes were soggy, and my uncle is as racist as ever, which basically describes 80% of American Thanksgivings. I want to go back to the tradition of going to big box stores at 2 in the afternoon. That's the real American way. Since I'm avoiding using Dragon Shouts this run for some arbitrary reason, probably because the smug cat is too smug to rely on such crutches as ignoring fall damage. I just do my usual skip right to the gate, speed through the speed traps, but since I'm only going 9 over the speed limit, the cops don't ticket me, and I let the spiders experience the warm embrace of shock torture for information. I make it to the end of the dungeon to learn my entire adventure was a waste of time, so I go do better things. Having consulted the wiki because like hell I'm going to be using the critical thinking part of my head, I head to the ruins just southwest of Dawnstar, that in my mind I keep mistaken for Paletown, and I set my textbook on fire because that's what the angry talking heads tell me to do for any book that dare question the status quo, especially for the dear leader, and I also return to the ruins near High Hrothgar to chill the book out. And since I'm getting an Elder Scroll, I decided to dive through Minshalift. This dungeon really isn't that difficult to navigate, just more I don't travel through this dungeon very much, and variety is the spice of life when you only play the same 2 to 3 games ad nauseum. At the very least, for my Dwemer dungeon dives, I will need to get 10 Dwemer cogs at some point, which I get without too much fuss thankfully. This is like one of the better dungeons to get the cogs. I honestly only remembered about the side quest when I saw my first cog. My brain probably needs those cogs more than Arniel. Before long, the bandits transition to whatever the hell the engineering boys are cooking up, anything to try to place third at the science convention, and as those in the economic building would say, nerds. The second section transforms the enemy variety from robots to Fulmer, or whatever the Dwemer were cooking up in the genetics engineering building. I tried visiting that building once to see if they can gene edit me to be less of a disappointment. All I got was a stutter and a third arm. Despite the enemies being a bit more difficult to take out, the dungeon really wasn't that difficult. Well, I say that, but the final boss of the place is a bloody Centurion Master. I would be threatened, but Impact is so overpowered, it couldn't do anything to me. Well, I turned the Optimus Prime embodiment of out-of-control capitalism, appeased Baldman into a dust bunny, got the last cog to make my brain work, not my speech impediment, and entered Blackreach. Thankfully, the game spits you out right by the scroll, just ahead to help a giant return to the afterlife. I pressed the buttons in random order, and I might have triggered a self-destruct mechanism, got a parchment I will eventually use to plagiarize my senior paper, and I returned to Riverwood to progress the main story. When I got there, I had some cultists hanging out inside of town. I do what only the most charitable of gentlemen would do, and attack them in broad daylight unprovoked. Probably why the FBI is always hovering on what I post online. But hey, my career counselor did tell me to find a path in life, so I became a psychopath. Speaking of psychopathy, I did make a pit stop in Riften to pay a certain hag a visit. I wanted to turn her to dust, but nah, these kids need an earnest reminder that despite their immortality state of being a child, they will die at some point, and it will smell awful. Though, to be honest, looking back at the footage, I really forgot what I was doing in town, since I don't do the Dark Brotherhood. Oh well, I paid a visit to Salakanir to get that boss fight done, and I'll just play out the fight in its earnest. My gods, mages can get so overpowered, and I plan on pushing this build to its litmus. I was initially planning on doing the Mages Guild Dwemer dungeon next, but my brain got really scrambled from whatever they were serving at the frat party, and I decided to abandon the idea and travel to Rorikstead by speed traveling. Just because the central part of Skyrim is so f***ing boring, and sprint chaining is so satisfying, albeit ridiculous. At the end of my travels, I came across some vigilantes of Stendarr. Oh yeah, it doesn't take a rocket scientist with 3 PhDs to know what I'm about to do to them. Rorikstead didn't like the idea though, and the guards attacked me on site for this act of aggression. There is actually research done into this. According to a study done by Vance et al. 2014, I don't give a f***. With the town wiped off the map thanks to my nasty habits, or the question of superiority of Jazargo, I continue my wanderings further west. I honestly cannot remember which dungeon contained the final fragment part. My brain is really fuzzy on this part, truth be told, so I began destroying enemies indiscriminately. I believe in playing fair. I am an equal opportunity slaughterer. I think I got my questlines confused, and instead of the Gulder questline, I nearly started on the Red Eagle quest. Wrong genocidal madman. After getting my brain back in partially working order, whereas close when you spent a year living in a suitcase because you couldn't afford anything else being a broke student, I came across the final part of the Destruction questline and a bunch of named bandits. Their names were erased from the echelons of history, just dust to the wind, and I found the Knights of the Nine Armor. I am too evil for this so I'll not be partaking in any pilgrimages. This is a public university, not an extremely expensive religious private one, thank you very much. I electrocuted the book, and I am blessed with the power of turning myself into a nuclear bomb. Continuing my random side objectives, I ventured forth towards the last of the Gulder fragments. My brain always forgets what this dungeon is for. It gets the Dragon Priest and Bard's College mixed up. I didn't feel like doing the Bard questline, mostly because this isn't a community college. My recollection of this dungeon is fuzzy at best, hence me getting the puzzle solved in a fraction of a second. The game really loves throwing ways to Draugr my way, since that is the gimmick of the boss fight. I would be concerned if the boss wasn't a complete pushover, and I take them out in a fraction of a second. Oh well, easy dungeon is easy, and I figure I could venture forth to get this questline done. On my way to the final ruins, I came across a bunch of vampires posing as vigilantes. Joke's on them. If they weren't dressed as vigilantes of Stendarr, I would not have attacked them unprovoked. Unless you're extremely brave, or extremely stupid like me, you never disguise yourself as a predator's prey. The dungeon is just a long hallway with sealed doors, like they're guarding a very special former arch-mage, Galder, hence why I did the questline. These bitches are so pissed that I called them all easy, they decided to come back for revenge as a boss gauntlet. I am the big boss, and these are just peasants, and they all went down even easier than last time. Sure, they can teleport around and all that horse shit, but it doesn't make much of a difference. They're all basic ass bitches. They tried one last time to off me, but daddy got home from work and with a belt, and everyone went to their rooms. I'm rewarded with a necklace I will never use, and that quest line is done. Since my ADHD got the better of me, I figured I could get the mage's quest line back on track. I never marked Kynes Grove on the map, so I had to hike there from Windhelm. And nearby the ruins, I found a funny cavern I straight up forgot existed. Like it isn't there in the vast pool of my mind, and I tried killing a bonehound, but the hound exists somewhere between two dimensions, and attacking the dog caused all of space-time to dissolve. And upon reloading my save, I was all the way back at the stables. Avoiding the dungeon like a plague, I eventually made it to Mizulft. This dungeon f***ing blows. It is a long corridor of disappointment, an echo of my days of depression trying to get a degree that would end up being worthless, giving myself PTSD over my perceived failures I am still trying to get over, graduating into the eve of a dwindling job market where nobody was hiring and the ensuing pandemic just tarnished all remaining hope of putting my participation prize known as a degree to good use, and every time someone brings up my degree, I am filled with a wave of despair of the failure I became, and the thought of going back would cause some mental anguish, and I wouldn't even be able to get into grad school because all the grant money is non-existent anymore, so all I have to show for my work is 4 years of meaninglessness, $30,000 of debt, 2 disappointing parents, and 1 worthless piece of paper that is a memento of what I could have been if I didn't let despair fall over me, and if I actually had connections and was born rich. Where was this going again? Oh yeah, snoozing through the dungeon. There wasn't much to say about this place. The enemies were lined up in single file, ready to be blasted into the zap compactor. The boss of the dungeon was a night prowler, which didn't mean much in the grand scheme of things. Just a farmer hurting as usual when my skin is made of paper. Eventually I find a mage from the rival college ready for the yearly football challenge. Don't worry, I am used to failure. Hell, my football team back in uni went 2-10. After playing icy hot with the machine, sure beats my method of repeatedly smacking the machines when they break, I get the information of where the plot relevant locations are. Back at college, I finally get around to starting Arniel's questline, and gave the grad student some cogs so maybe he can pull another all-nighter for his research paper that he does his best to not get flagged as AI generated, though it ends up anyways. Arcana got bored and lonely, so he started playing with his balls, and walking in on such a private and uncomfortable moment caused Servos to suddenly die from shame. And Winterhold is full of energy anomalies. I figured this would be a great time to give the dilapided town another Nagasaki moment, so I started embodying my inner nuclear bomb and self-detonating, which only did half of the anomaly's health. Yeah, master level spells in Skyrim kinda suck. After exploding a second time, the town is saved, and I get a bunch of soul gems for enchanting levels because I want to take the funny mage build to its limits. Next up is Labyrinthian, and since it was along my path, I did check out the pay-to-win Wizard's Tower. I mean, every mage needs a tower to conduct experiments on unwilling participants that might violate several Geneva conventions, just like the FBI who I know is watching this video. Hope you all get some wonderful inspiration, and please don't come after me yet, or else Santa Claus won't be able to save cereal in a few weeks. Once I had some free rare candies and enchanting experience, I didn't feel like doing the enchanting exploit, I finally made it to the longest dungeon of the game, and the frost rolls are nothing. As soon as I enter the dungeon, I am greeted by a bone dragon. Despite being a unique boss enemy, it goes down very easily. The dungeon itself wasn't overtly difficult, but the main thing is that it is super annoying as a mage, because every time the voices in my head speak ill of me, which is every day to be honest, my magicka is drained. That and the enemies are leveled quite a bit too. I think this is the first time I did this dungeon as a mage as intended, so I'm kinda learning firsthand the true difficulty of this dungeon. Stealth Archer kinda breaks the difficulty of the game. The main difficulty is that the voices come at the worst time, draining me of my magicka right before I fight some enemies, so I have to wait a bit before I can start blasting. The Wisp Mother mini-boss wasn't too difficult. It tries hiding behind some fire, but me more harm than good. Eventually the Draugr began doing funny size experiments. It's okay, I took chemistry once, so I should be a good teacher. Okay children, let's combine some bleach with some vinegar, and be sure to take a deep breath. Inside the third or fourth section, There are honestly too many damn zones in this dungeon. I thought I could try to damage boost my way through the mortar fires to stop the spells. It doesn't do any good. Wards are indeed pretty useless, so next go around, I just run out the soul gems and it works like a charm. Eventually I met with a Draugr Deathlord, which could probably 2 or 3 shot me, if impact continues to be totally balanced. I think the Scourge right afterwards would suffer because Mordecai is a dickhead. Speaking of assholes, next up is Mordecai himself. Stagger is a totally balanced perk that is totally not overpowered in any way whatsoever, and I just used the dual cast to stun lock the boss to death. Easiest Dragon Priest indeed. Also, I was ambushed on the way out. Yeah, thanks for the free loot. Ready to graduate from college and be thrown into the real world with the only thing to show for is a piece of paper I downloaded from some Google Doc, I entered college and began the final battle with Arcano. He is a f***ing joke. Instead of attacking me, the professor spent the entire fight fighting the Anomalies, and even brought out his fist to settle his disputes the old-fashioned way, by angrily sending a revenge porn email to the mass message email, but ended up being a reply all, and everyone on campus got the email, even the president of the university. He wasn't seen at class for the rest of the semester. Well, the day is saved, and I go right from student to arch-mage, skipping the entire food chain. I like being handed power for free by doing absolutely nothing. This must be what being the son of a CEO must be like. Well, he gave J'zargo the arch-mage robes, since it is probably his dream, and the thought of all the power was enough for him to strip all of his clothes. This is a public place. We don't need any more stereotypes for the furry community. I can use the money for moon sugar or something. With the questline done, I figure I could probably begin working towards the ultimate power, the ability to cast spells for nothing. And in my small mind, I decided to return to Whiterun for some reason, forgetting that the entirety of the hold wants my head for unrelated crimes against humanity. Not the vigilantes, but rather the guards. Vigilantes aren't human anyways. And they just pushed me a few meters towards the door. Wait, most of my audience is American. Okay, time for a quick unit conversion. 1 meter equates to 1 bald eagle, and you can interchange centimeters with bullets. Wanting my stolen back, I decided to break my loot out of jail. The guard was watching the loot I stole from the vigilantes like a hawk, so I employed the oldest trick in the book, sticking a bucket on his head as I rob him blind. Buckets remain to be the holy grail of Skyrim. Thank you so much, Mitten Squad. And you should never leave your home without at least 3 dozen of them. And now comes the ascension of my power, becoming the apex of the hierarchy of game balance and becoming a god. Which is what J'zargo probably wants. I don't know, I don't read into the companions that much. Sucks that 90% of them were all one note. I buy some master level spells for when I get very bored, and begin getting some training in the ways of enchanting, letting me craft Fortified Destruction up to 20%, and I can cast some of the most powerful spells for next to nothing, but we can do better. So now comes the slow process of training my enchanting over and over, selling what I don't need for more gems, and even doing some exploration for more free loot to work with. En route to the random dungeon for Arniel, I had to save Karthwassen from a dragon attack, and the dragon went down without too much fuss. I thought I'd be doing the cool fort that turns into a Fulmer infestation where you get the long hammer, but nah, it is just a cavern full of spiders with cloaks, and failing miserably at solving the gate puzzle. To be honest, I don't think I've ever been through this dungeon before. It is extremely short, and I have the staff needed for some arbitrary reason, which I turned in for the next quest in the chain, putting metal utensils into microwaves. This quest requires a lot of walking around, going to random places, putting warp gem inside, using a horrible destruction spell that makes flames seem like elemental flare, and blowing up another microwave. Maybe that is why they don't have any appliances plugged in at the hardware stores anymore, or why they don't let me in hardware stores anymore. I hand in my heavily irradiated science experiments that shouldn't be confused for a drug-infused high, and upon leaving the dorms, I was raided by the campus police. I swear they're always hanging out in the parking lots waiting for the nanosecond the parking meter expires. And while I wait the final quest in Arniel's questline, I spend the time power leveling enchanting, making quick pit stops in the Mountain of Solitude to level alteration, and after a long time making random mundane objects magical, I have finally achieved my targeted 80 in enchanting, which is the level I require to craft the final tier of armors. I go around looting the chests of my forefathers and probably continuing the economic decline of the country, and lastly purchasing a fifth of enchanting, and after my long journey of self-actualization, I have finally achieved my aspiration of crafting armors with 25% destruction reduction, and when fully applied, I can now cast destruction spells for nothing, meaning I am free to cause as much carnage as I damn well please. which will let me see to the conclusion of this run. But first, I still have the whole Fandel vs Sven debacle that's been haunting the Skyrim community for the last 14 years. And every year, Fandel blows Sven out of the water. So this year, I figure I could sell the whole love triangle a different way. I say my vows to Camilla, probably the worst option for Camilla given my extensive history of bringing suffering and hell to the lands of Tamriel, but it sure as hell beats Sven singing. Ready to begin wrapping up this overly long run that YouTube seems to love these days, I began the process of giving Malborn every item I had on my person. This is a hazing ritual, because now I have to run naked through the cold at sub-freezing temperatures as I try to get a keg from the local store and be arrested and sent to jail for a long time. You know, I'm starting to think it wasn't supposed to be a hazing ritual, and they just wanted to get rid of me. Oh well. I entered the Thalmor embassy and began the stealth operation. But I am a thermonuclear warhead. I have a Death Star beam coming from my wrist, so I will let the montage play. Once I have the relevant information, I return to Mega Delphox but 100 times worse, and now begin the extraction mission from the sewers, along with letting curiosity get better of the cat. I think with the mage build taken to its absolute limit, the entire notion of difficulty has left the building, taken all the stuff, left the name tag on the desk, and left a very foul-smelling present somewhere no one could find. It definitely ruined morale for the next month, until it was time to do taxes. Eventually I convulsed with schizophrenia, and we began our escape from the voices telling us to hype videos on mobile. I have no idea what a hype is. I use desktop. Since it has been a minute, I returned to the college to check in on Arniel on his endeavors, and he gives me the final quest of the chain, which points me to the cave where I had my crash at. Honestly poetic that the roads would point me here. Yet another radiant cave full of conjurers, and the reason they all have fire resist potions in their inventories. The Ascendant Conjurer ascended to the afterlife, and I have a third of the tools needed to beat Morrowind, which I really should do at some point, and I turn in edging to Arniel. He receives a stab at the soul gem until he deletes himself from the game world, but at least the questline is finally complete and wrapping up every single bonus objective, so I think it's about time I start playing Origin Depths as I normally do for the final part of the video. I let the blades play with each other when in reality, nobody actually likes them, and they point me in the direction of Skyhaven Temple. When I got there, the Forestmen were having a duet with an Elder Dragon. I brought up my Death Star beam, and just smited everyone and everything. I really need to work on my tracking. I haven't done much tracking ever since my over-depression inducing days. Honestly cathartic lasting nudist from afar. The inside nudists weren't that much better, and I failed repeatedly on a puzzle because I don't even think the puzzle actually works. Gave the seal some feline leukemia, and got my information to bring right to the Greybeards. The thought did cross my mind, what if we were to set these Greybeards on fire? Would that constitute burning fossil fuels? Let's not question the morality of Dante's Inferno, but rather the implications of being able to control the weather. Get ready for a blizzard of a lifetime, Nebraska! I then communed with the snack bowl at the frat party because I think drinking all that mystery substance might have caused my brain a break. Nah, I actually never went to a party back in college. I spent my days studying for mysterious scrolls and getting the foreknowledge of what will be on the exam since the professors really changed what's on the tests. So Alduin can either be a grueling gauntlet or an absolute pushover. I'll exacerbate the sentence to prove the point that if you have the right perks in the mage skill, every single encounter can be an absolute cakewalk, and how if you invest in the right perks and utilizing enchanting, which is the single most important skill in Skyrim, you can turn any fight into free experience, including the Ebony Warrior. So much so, this is probably the fastest Alduin fight I've ever had. I talked to my ex who ghosted me on our date night, leaving me alone and depressed, and I began talking to the leaders about ending this pointless war. I felt like ending this run a little bit quicker, and since I'm still operating at 776% mental faculties, I just jail warp to the palaces. I honestly don't need anything to get me through the rest of the game. Once the crybabies were brought to a daycare, I let them play with dangerous toys like knives and a Tickle Me Elmo strapped to a car battery as I fall asleep because these peace talks are so enthralling. Once they have settled their differences with 4 counts of child endangerment, I travel to the Whiterun balcony to get a nice look at the landscape. Oh. Well, my alternative self was hunted for war crimes that the other Jazargo committed, and I took my rideshare I totally didn't pay for to Skuldolphin. This place was a joke. The enemies were all leveled up to match my player level, but in terms of power scaling, they were all jokes. I am 2 shotting whites, and scourges are disarmed in mere seconds. Sometimes I'm taken for joyrides because I'm so underpowered, but here, I am the driver, the alcoholic, and the officer all at the same time, sending these poor fools on a high-speed chase down the freeway straight to hell. Rarely do I need a pause for effect. I just mow down the forces without thinking about anything. Even the White Lord was a joke, and my taser is the laugh track. Feeling high on power, I even decided to double team the boss level dragons, an Elder and a Frost. They were just afterthoughts, and my death beam could just fry them to bits. I even frightened a Kreen, though I think I whiffed half of my shots. But once my beam could connect, yeah, the priest wasn't making it out alive. I ripped the head off for posterity's sake, and I make it inside the afterlife. I let soon know that instead of rushing the main story, I actually took the time to do some bonus objectives to pad out the runtime for sweet, sweet ad revenue, and engage in battle. Well, I say that, but it was an afterthought. Sure, he gets iframes, but once they wore out, I gave him the punishment of a lifetime, strapping his rock-hard chest to an electric chair until his ass blew out his intestines. He let me grab my backup, where I began to lay into Alduin. I began charging my death beat. Oh, f it. I use my less fancy Thunderbolt spells because the game doesn't let me have nice things, repeatedly frying the lizard like strapping a salamander to a lightning rod in a storm, until the poor guy explodes from my affinity to sadistic comments, and I more or less beat Skyrim as a mustacheless Jizargo. That was an honestly fun run. Once you get going on enchanting and focusing on your destruction, the mage can be one of the most powerful ways to play Skyrim. So much so, I think the basic melee style is the weakest of the three. I think it is rather poetic that when I started making challenge runs a few years ago, I was using some spells, especially in the Ant run, I would struggle thanks to my dwindling magic reserves, but as I have grown as a challenge runner, I have become accustomed to the mage lifestyle, even go so as to break the game wide open. I say that, but more than likely the next time I play as a mage, I will more than likely have to use alteration, and I think the prospect of guzzling a canister of gasoline is a much more tantalizing prospect. But yeah, I do enjoy doing these character-focused power runs, a cathartic run of making the game into my plaything, though it does take the challenge out of challenge runs. I do think for the next Skyrim challenge run, I want to make myself miserable, so stay tuned to that. Before we sign off, I want to give a special thank you to the channel members and patrons who are the biggest Jizargo sims this side of the furry fandom, who also get early access to my challenge runs and names in the credits. Links to them, along with my social medias and my Discord in the description. Hopefully you'll enjoy this run. If you did, be sure to drop a like, subscribe for more masochism and any other ways to torture myself, leave them down below. This has been Orpheolus, and I'll see you all in the next one.